Uh, what I found is that actually the studies from neuroscience today are showing that if anything, we humans are more, quote, wired, to use that language, uh, for caring, for sharing. For example, studies show that the pleasure centers in our brains light up more when we share than when we win. Isn't that interesting? Completely against the story that we're told. Uh, so, having been told false stories, uh, we really need to change our worldview to be more in line with the reality of what we are here dealing with, which is relationships. Because, as both Merlin and Pat noted, it's an interconnected world, a world of relationships. Um, and it isn't so much, I think, because we can be independent as well as dependent at the same time. We can realize our full potentials and at the same time uh, really understand our interconnection so that we can have relations, not perfect, not ideal. I mean, sometimes people lose it, and they're violent, but we can build societies like, yes, like the partnership model that we find in our prehistory. But it requires attention. This is where I really will start to wind down here and close. It requires attention to connecting the dots. And you cannot connect the dots as long as you leave out these huge dots of childhood and gender, childhood, women and children. I mean, if you really think of our conventional studies, social studies, if you think of our conventional way of classifying, right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, they marginalize at best and really almost leave out the majority of our species, women and children. Once you take that into account, you come full circle to the neuroscience. Okay, I told you I was going to get back to that. Uh, because if indeed what we know today, uh, the first years are so critical and the brain develops as we know it does in humans because we have a very flexible brain, which is wonderful, but it also makes us very susceptible to our environments, which for humans are cultural. So then the issue is to what degree does a particular time and place orient to the partnership or domination side of the social scale? And what we then know is that uh, if we are early, what children first experience and observe is so important, then it stands to reason that to shift to a world where we can relate to each other in more respectful, more caring, more mutually beneficial relationships, like the fungi and the plants that Merlin spoke about, then we really have to pay attention to our culture and to what is presented to us as human nature, as truth, as reality. So, my books and my research really, I think, stand reality right side up and present us with the evidence. Because while I agree with Pat that we absolutely have to use all of our capacities, and that includes emotions. And by the way, in domination systems, men do get some emotions. They get anger and they get contempt, as is appropriate for those who dominate. But, caregiving, nonviolence, somehow those are not important. So we don't have money for healthcare, for childcare. Uh, it's a crazy system, really. And there is a gendered system of values that we have to unpack and change. And this has nothing to do with anything inherent in women and men. So I will close by saying that if we really pay attention to what we are today actually learning about reality and about relationships, if we discard the old categories of right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, and think in terms of the partnership, domination, social scales, and the very different social configurations. Because it isn't only a matter of cooperation. You can cooperate for terrible ends, monopolies, uh, gangs, terrorists cooperate. Uh, but if we can work together to build, and we have the opportunity now, because as Pat mentioned, so much is crumbling, but there can also be another regression. So it's up to us, it's up to human agency, but using what we today know about what has been possible and continues to be possible, which is to complete this really uh, cultural shift, cultural transformation that's reflected in science, that's reflected in some of the indigenous cultures, from domination to partnership.